And welcome back to another episode of Theory Pre-Med. Theory Pre-Med is a podcast following the journey of three pre-med students, Mo, Todd, and Nathan. We talk about our path and experiences as we bring in guests that connect pre-meds worldwide. If you're thinking about med school or healthcare, our podcast will give you the ultimate student perspective.
Yeah, we're like the pit bull of
the pit bull of pre-meds.
As always, thank you to Chapman Radio for giving us the space and opportunity to record our episodes. So, take us into our segment.
All right. So, first segment, as always, or as recently, we are we're having our pre-med pre-game. This is a segment where all three of us talk about something that we've learned over the past week in our classes. So, I want to go last because I don't really know something. So, you guys go first.
I could go first today. So, I learned that to make a covalent bond, it's not only two nonmetals. It could actually be a metal and a nonmetal.
Wait.
Yeah.
Metals can covalently bond.
Oh yeah.
Which is insane because like all of Gen Chem, I've been taught that it had like ionic bonds were metal and nonmetal, and then
correct.
And then
ionic bonds are metal to metal.
No. Ionic bonds are metal and non-metal.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
Covalent bonds are non-metal and non-metal.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
Generally speaking, but
yeah,
of course we
I'm
learned
tripping.
that there can be a covalent bond between iron and nitrogen in a lot of proteins.
Yeah,
I think
so.
it's
especially
just like
hemoglobin in its heme group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whenever you go into biochem, just know the proximal histidine does covalently bond to the iron.
That was a frustrating question on the test, so I think a lot of people got that wrong.
Make sure to put true on that question.
Yeah. For mine, I would say one thing I learned this week was the fact that we don't actually know how like anesthesia works. Like we don't really no one knows the mechanisms behind it.
I've heard something about that, but
yeah. All we know is that it just works. And I think one of the reasons why is because anesthesia I think is like only 150 years old. Just based off something I was reading. I think that's what it said. And then also, well, it was kind of funny because I was looking at a paper with my neuroscience professor.
I thought you were going to say like with my name on it. I was like, oh, damn.
No, and we were looking through it. And then one of the conclusions, this is like about anesthesia. One of the conclusions was literally the fact that it was like, we still don't know how the mechanism works. And so basically like there's no actual knowledge on how anesthesia works. We just know that it does its job.
That's awesome.
Pretty crazy.
You know, back in the day, back in my day, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Back in the day, when babies were operated on, they actually thought that they didn't feel anything, so they would do surgery on them without doing any anesthesia on them. Which is insane. I'm like, the baby's crying. Like, what's happening? So it's crazy how much medicine has developed over the past years.
Because one thing I was thinking about was the fact that like, there's so many things from the history of medicine that now we look back on and we're like, oh, that's barbaric. I mean, you think about things like lobotomies where you literally get a nail and you go through like the upper eye, right? You think, oh, like these things, like who even thought about these things? But I think about now, it's like, well, we're injecting stuff in people and we don't really know exactly how the mechanism works. So it's like in the future,
how much have we really changed?
Yeah, are we gonna look back on it and be like, we were barbaric with anesthesia?
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting.
Possibly.
Come back in I don't know
200 years.
Yeah, in 200 years.
Yeah.
Episode 2 million.
The problem is like
episode 2
the thing
million.
is like it works. Like it does its job. So. So yeah, I don't know.
All right, we'll be waiting for episode 200 years in the future.
Yeah, but I should clarify, it's not local anesthesia, it's general. It's like the stuff that puts you to sleep.
Okay.
Interesting.
Which makes sense,
Yeah.
So mine will be authentic leadership. Leadership has a lot of different theories of how it can be approached, and I've talked about a couple of them in the past on the podcast, and the one I learned about this week is authentic leadership, which is a relatively new style where the leader basically is exactly what it sounds like, authentic in every way, honest, truthful, has a path, a goal, and sticks to their morals, and that alone is enough to make them a worthwhile leader. It's a really new leadership theory. And I took a test on it and realized I am very bad at it. I am not. I mean, I feel like I'm an authentic person in general, but on the leadership side of things, I scaled low, not that low, like medium low, on every category of this style leadership. So it's something I guess I should improve on.
Well, is this like different styles of leadership, or is it more of like is this an indicator of whether or not you're a good or bad leader? It's
not
just
in general.
style?
It's just a different style. There's some leadership styles like that I'm really good at. But apparently not authentic leadership, which is a very modern type of theory, and it's only like recently been like discovered and like theorized, experimented with, I guess. So yeah, there's a little bit of research to it that people do, but I am not an authentic leader yet. But I think
that's a key word.
You're fake. You're a fake leader.
I think it sounds like when I say it like that, it sounds like I'm a fake leader. But it's really just like that quality of like being 100% sticking to your morals at all times. And I think that's something that kind of everybody can struggle with. So I'm not 100% like that either. So, all right.
Yeah.
I guess do we all get everybody's pregame out of the way?
The pre-med pregame.
That's the closing music.
It's a weird Friday.
It is a weird Friday. You're right.
I feel like, I don't know, today I've been like walking around and I feel like so many people have just been down.
It might be the weather.
I've been a little sad.
I love this weather though.
I've been okay.
And I mean, for us, or at least for me, the biochem quiz kind of busted today. So I'm sure people have stuff going on today. And
I think it's also that point in the semester. I think because for us, the way our calendars are set is that we have one day off on the second week of school, and then we go all the way until Thanksgiving.
And then 2 weeks off, 2 weeks school, and then you're
It really is like.
So it becomes a grind in fall.
It's a serious grind right now. Like everybody's feeling it. But today was a little bit more positive for me because, well, first of all, there's a chess tournament right after this, which is going to be great. But the giant chess set for our club got delivered. It came in.
I saw the Instagram.
Yeah. It was. We posted on Instagram. I took it into Swenson and a couple board members and I set it up and we played a couple of games on it. It was awesome. I mean, no. But
so that's why Nathan wasn't here for our meeting.
That's exactly what I was doing. But I thought our meeting.
We had a theory pre-med meeting.
I thought it was at 12:30. I thought we said that.
Oh man.
But it's okay. I mean.
Yeah, it's okay.
And this is why you use a calendar.
Yeah, I know. We gotta make some. We gotta make some Nathan zones.
Oh, that's sick.
Nathan
really
zones.
Cool.
Nathan zones for theory pre-med.
If you're interested in seeing what a chess board looks like, this is
so cool, dude. Oh wait, it went away. It's huge. We're gonna take it outside in the piazza and just have students play with it. It's gonna be great.
Where are you storing all of that?
Yeah, good question. It's
somewhere.
It's kind of up in the air, but we have a temporary storage spot in the engineering lab, and we're gonna have to figure out something more permanent by the end of the semester. So
totally.
But yeah.
Cool.
Do you guys have anything exciting planned for the weekend?
Nope.
Lab report.
Lab report. Yeah, definitely.
That's literally
just
the whole
for
thing.
some more context, we have a lab report where every section has to be 4 pages, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And at least Mo and I, because we're lab partners, we haven't started it at all.
For the rough draft, we literally submitted.
an
empty document.
It's one sentence. It's part 1, and that's it.
So I like how you wrote that one sentence, and you're like, "Nah, I'm good. This is it."
No, actually, okay. I do have a story about this because I was gonna work on it. Well, so I had 2 things I had to do that Sunday. One of them was I had to make a website for a brain control interface for neuroscience, and then I also had to write the lab report, right? Or at least I wanted to start it. And so I procrastinated a lot, as a typical Sunday would go. And then what happened was I sat down. I was about to do this thing. I was like, okay, let me go to the bathroom really quick. I go to the bathroom. Well, no. I go to the bathroom, and it's my toilet's clogged. It's just somehow. I don't even know. I don't even think I did anything. I think I was using it normally.
Might have been Riley.
I don't know. But basically, it was clogged, and I was like, dang. And so I had to solve that. And what happened was I went and I had to go get a plunger And I was sitting there, I was plunging for like
Let's see the form.
No, and then
what's the technique? Get the
and I was like, oh gosh, like I can't do this. And so what happened was I had to like call public safety and like I come and have them do it. And basically the guy had to get like this super like, you know, this mega plunger thing, and then he had to like get there and he like
mega plunger.
He like went and he was going hard at it and he fixed it, and I was like, oh thank God.
Which officer came?
No, it wasn't office. It was like on call like plumber.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I was like describing it to like my parents, and they were saying like, oh, like it sounds like something like pretty like stuck in the pipes, because the way the dorms are like set up is that like all the pipes go to like one like main pipe, and then so he was like, it could have not been me, and I don't think it was, because I was just doing normal stuff.
Somebody else clogged their toilet, and then it like got clogged to yours because
so
the pipes are connected.
Big clog. Anyways, so then that delayed me for like 3 hours. So at that point I was like, okay, I can't afford to work on my laptop anymore, because I gotta like do the website by Tuesday.
That's fair.
So
that's fair. That story reminded me a lot of a story you told a long time ago on the podcast about like you seeing a stray dog and then you were scared of it.
Yeah,
it's always. Do you remember that?
It's always random stuff.
It's just random stuff happening to you, and it gets really convoluted.
There's one episode that talks about that, but basically there's a stray dog and I chased it around for like 2 hours before going into my hospital shift. But yeah, I guess, it happens.
All right.
Some weird stuff happens.
Well, exciting things, and hopefully this weekend isn't as miserable as the last one, and not filled with a lot of toilet work.
What do you guys think of The Habit?
Oh yeah, this was our like our mini discussion before our actual topic. But basically Nathan was saying how he doesn't like it that much.
Nah, it's mid.
Really?
I think it's really good.
I think it's really good. What do you get?
I just get like a normal burger,
that's where you're going wrong.
Like,
what do you get?
I have to look.
You guys are not gonna like this, but I don't like the sauce they put on it. What is it? Thousand Island or whatever the sauce they put on it.
I don't know what you're getting, bro.
I like the char burger, the regular char burger.
This is where it's at.
The sauce.
Oh, what is that?
The French onion char burger.
The French onion.
Oh, it went away.
It went away, but it's okay.
No, it looks good.
That looks kind of fire.
I get the Santa Barbara char.
That is good too.
Yeah, it's like breading.
But their burgers are so flat.
What? Really?
Yeah.
I think you just had a bad experience.
Get other
maybe the one in Riverside isn't the best.
I think
that's the only one I've had.
Maybe the actual burgers, but like I think the other stuff is good. Like I wouldn't normally get like an actual
the fries are bad too, though.
I don't get the fries either. I get the tempura green beans. I think those are good.
Yeah. They did have like this one like special promotion where they had like Brussels sprouts, and that was really good. I like Brussels sprouts. The like the sautéed kind, roasted Brussels sprouts.
That's you and you alone.
I know.
This is making me really hungry.
I'm just kidding. I think Brussels sprouts aren't bad.
I'm really hungry.
They're good, man. And they had really good ones at Habit, but that was the only thing I like got.
Cool. We're all hungry. Let's do it. Let's do a food recommendation. Just one place really quick. Like what's
Five
good?
Guys.
Cane's. I just had Cane's.
Okay. I would say Cali tacos. But
Cali
that's just
tacos.
on my mind.
That's on your mind.
Guys. It's on my mind.
Yeah, I was on the Cali tacos. Like I was craving it a couple weeks ago. I know. I never got it though.
It happens so often where I see you and you're like, bro,
Cali
burrito bro. Sounds so good right now.
Let's get it.
I think it's so funny.
All right. Well, that concludes our pre-med pregame.
Yeah, and pre-med pre-talk, I guess.
Yeah. Take us into the episode. What are we talking about?
So we're talking about research today.
Research.
How are we doing with
Todd titled it "Researching for the Truth."
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cute.
Searching for the truth.
It's kind of cute, kind of cringe, but I thought it was. That was
pretty
fun.
cute.
No, I think for research there's a lot of like pros and cons, and like especially when you're doing it with school, right? And you're taking 15, 18 credits.
Yeah.
And it's just like sometimes it gets in the way.
Yeah.
In a way, and it's hard to really just progress a lot with it. Yeah.
And that's kind of like some things we're going to talk about. Yeah. But I did want to make it clear that this is going to be a little bit separate from like a pre-med do's and don'ts video, which we're definitely going to do in the future. That'll be more centered on like our individual experiences with it. But I think what I really want to talk about, or what we really want to talk about today, is the idea of like research. Maybe some problems that we've kind of seen, or that things that we've learned about just kind of that whole world in general.
Right.
But also, still giving the old theory pre-med advice that we are so famous for. Oh, wait,
yeah.
we're internet
Speaking
famous
of our
now.
famous,
we're internet famous.
Most of you have probably seen this already, but we've
Most
been
of you.
all of you
All
probably,
of you.
yeah.
We've gotten more viewers on that video than our total listens.
We posted a pretty funny TikTok, Instagram video, just a short video, where, what was it, like Todd failed a test and then Mo got a 99%, and Mo was really sad about it because he missed that 1%.
Yeah.
That was like the whole video, and it kind of blew up on Instagram Reels. We got like 4,500.
Yeah, blowing up for us at least.
Yeah, for us.
Right now it's at 4,342 views.
That's
just like so crazy. It's so crazy.
I said I think this is like the most famous I've ever been on the internet.
This is the most famous I've ever been, period.
Yeah.
I mean, you just think about how many people 4,342.
That's pretty insane.
How many people saw you?
I know, and I told one of you, I think it was Nathan. I was like, yeah, these 4,300 or so people, the only way they're ever gonna know me ever is as the guy who got a 42% on the OChem test, like in like a Instagram reel.
Imagine that video blows up, and then we start like people start like seeing us on the street, and they're like, "Oh, you're the guy that got the 42%. Oh, you're the guy that got 99%. Professor Nathan."
Professor Nathan.
Yeah, like people have like seen it. A lot of people have talked to us on campus about it.
That's
even
cool.
like some professors have like said, "Oh, I saw it. And I thought it was funny." So that was nice.
Really,
That's
that's great. Yeah.
Hopefully we can get more things.
Yeah, we'll keep cranking out those high quality.
We're content machines
for
now,
you guys. But that was pretty exciting to me. I mean, this is like our second real TikTok, other than like the clips that we post on our channel, and it blew up like more than we expected for sure. So, yeah, I'm really excited for the future of our TikTok as well. All right, so let's get into
I want
it.
to start us off by asking Nathan. Because you're relatively new to research. When you first got into research, what was something that you was very surprising to you? I'm putting you on the spot.
Okay, well, the thing that was most surprising, and then this doesn't go for every research lab, but for me specifically, is that the research lab that me and Mo are part of, we do our own thing. We're able to basically do our own project as long as we get the training for the equipment, and we get advice from our research professor, Dr. Islam. But we pretty much on our own in terms of like coming up with ideas, actually coming up with like the experiment, the procedure exactly. And that was really surprising to me because I expected to be kind of like my hand held along the way, like the whole time. Just when I thought of research, like way before coming into it. But it was a new experience, and I really liked the idea of doing it all like on my own. I really enjoyed that like kind of idea, but I knew that I hadn't done research before, so it was gonna be kind of tough at first, and it was. But now I've kind of sunk into it pretty deeply, and I'm doing my experiment. It's going pretty well, but I'm still early on, so. We can talk about like our lab and exactly what we're doing a little later.
I think I totally agree with you though on the fact that when I first got into research, I thought you're either going to be working under a graduate student or a professor the entire time.
Exactly.
And I think the majority most universities, like the larger universities, that's how it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because typically the professor is doing a lot of the researching and things like that, and you're just doing their side projects.
Exactly. You'd be like an aid.
They're telling you what to do and you're doing it.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of envisioning, but this is really unique experience, and totally. I love it.
And I think it has its pros and cons. Like, you're obviously developing all these skills on your own, and like you're being a lot more independent. You have a lot more freedom with the things that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
However, at times it is overwhelming, I have to say, because you're given this article and it's very scientific, and it's not something that our brains are really used to. And especially when they go into specific things that we haven't really learned in a lecture yet, and you're just trying to drive all these pieces of information to create a procedure that you could follow, is sometimes very frustrating, especially when you just have to constantly go back and forth. And sometimes you create your procedure and you do it and it doesn't work, and you just have to go back and all that, instead of like having someone who's already done it for you, just telling you do this, and then you just kind of move on with it. And I felt like at times, just because you're working on your own project, it feels lonely in a way, just because
it does.
You wish if you had someone, like another student who you could bounce ideas back and forth on. And like, let's say we were both working on the same project. Then you have a different schedule than I do. So then our research project could be going through the entire process a lot faster.
You're right.
Like, while I'm out of class, I could be doing steps A and B. While you're out of class, you could be doing C and D. You know, and that way you're really progressing the research a lot further and a lot faster, which I think are the pros to it. But at the same time, I think it's beneficial and it's different, and you just everything comes with its pros and cons.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. But let's hear from Todd a little bit. Something that surprised you maybe about your research, or
I mean,
hear a little bit about it.
Yeah, for me, I think what surprised me when I first started was how different it actually is from science classes. There's a huge difference in what you're learning between research versus what you're learning in your science classes, which might not always be as apparent to the, like, you know, at first, or to someone who's like outside looking in. But, you know, I think it's like what you learn in lecture is, I might have said this before, but what you learn in lecture is like what science is. It's a lot of like, okay, this is this, you know, cells have these organelles. These organelles have these, then they do this. But then research is less about the actual content, and even though it does still involve a lot of the content that you learn, but more of how are you going to answer this question? How are you going to discover something that has not been discovered? Or how are you going to ask a question that will, you know, help you, you know, get like, not the results that you want, but like, how are you, like, what question are you going to ask, basically? Because that has to deal a lot with the data that you're going to be dealing with, and, you know, what the kind of the strength of maybe your answer might be. And so that kind of teaches you like how to do science, I feel like.
And just to add on to what you said, I think part of it, like, yes, it's very different than what you're learning in lecture, but you need that lecture material so when you do get your results, you're able to explain it. Because those are going to be the pathways. For example, if you're doing cell work, you need to be able to explain, hey, why did this happen when I manipulated these type of things? And it's very difficult because you are in a brand new environment that hasn't really been studied yet. So you're the front line on that.
The forefather.
So that's what makes it very rewarding, though. It's like high risk, high reward in a way, because yes, like people are investing in your research. A lot of money is going into it, and you're spending a lot of time in that research. But sometimes it could go nowhere, and you have to go back and kind of figure things out again. And that's where the risk comes in. But the reward is you have that opportunity to make a difference and really like progress that field of study forward for the next generation of people.
And I think one thing I think that has surprised all of us, though, is actually how long things take to go. And that's sort of like
I'm always complaining about.
And that's
dude.
And that's something that we'll transition to right now. But basically, you know, I think when we first think about research, you think of just a bunch of people like in a lab all doing like this project
factory,
and things moving fast, you know, and things like that. But I think our experiences have all totaled up to, you know, projects taking, you know, months and months or even years. And basically things take a long time. And I think especially in our research lab, where like when you're synthesizing something, there's, at least for my particle, it's 3 different steps. And so step 1 takes 24 hours, and then you have to centrifuge, which takes like 6 hours. And it's like constantly going back and forth, like removing the supernatant, which is like just the liquid up top, and then replacing it, like doing all that stuff, redispersing it and centrifuging again. And then once you're done with that, you have to wait another 24 hours, and you have to heat at different temperatures. It's just very long, time consuming. And that's, I think, where it becomes difficult at an undergraduate level to do research. Is because of the time commitment. And we do have to put out a short disclaimer, I think, on the fact that all of us have only done research in academia. None of us have done research in biotech, which I assume is a lot different. And based off of what I've heard, it's a lot different. But yeah, these are just our experiences with like academia research.
Yeah, correct.
I feel like with biotech, from what I've heard, is more like they have a specific product and they're just developing it or making it a little better. over time. At least when that one person came to our class and talked about it. But then again, I'm not really familiar with that field. But with academia, it's more like discovering things and really just finding out the answers.
I think adding
questions.
to that body of knowledge that already exists, like we talked a lot about in GCI, becoming an authoritative voice on your topic.
And I think in biotech, one thing that they emphasize a lot is the fact that you have to deal with, like, you're competing with other companies that are making like either the same thing or something that's super similar, and so that's why things have to be pushed out faster, why they have to be busier and stuff like that. Well, maybe not, but
I have a question for you then. Would you say that biotech companies have a bigger emphasis on money making than discovery?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think just based off what I've heard. I
agree with that too.
Yeah, because a lot of times, or at least in R&D, like research and development, they're doing it to make money. Like
how can we make
products
to
make
money?
You're a business.
Yeah, exactly.
The entire point of a business is to make money.
Yeah. They're asking the question a lot more often: how can we make this product more cost efficient, and how can we sell it to more people? So we're asking the questions: how can we can change this one little thing about what we're doing, and like experiment with it and see its properties and stuff like that. So
now, speaking about things being time consuming, I think you can really make it work though, because if you're able to plan your week out, then you could be really efficient. So for example, if you are running a reaction where you have to monitor it for 4 hours straight, while you're in the lab and you're just watching this thing, you could be dissecting another article to set up your next procedure, for example. Kind of like breaking up your time and really figuring out how you can maximize the amount of things you're doing at once could be very beneficial. But at the same time, you don't want to do that too much to an extent where you start getting confused and rushing things. Because
write stuff down.
Exactly. Write everything down and keep track of everything. So if you made a mistake, for example, write that down. Write down what happened. Why did that mistake happen? If you need to go back to your procedures, go back and figure that out. But I think the biggest thing is don't try to fake things. That's, I think, the biggest thing, because at the end of the day, I think a big goal of a lot of people doing research is, they want to discover new things, but that comes into publication too. Because when you make that publication, if you had that false data and you built everything off of that data, it's just going to bite you in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of takes us into the next part that we want to talk about is this idea of like good science and bad science. One thing that I've heard, I don't have an exact like statistic or something to cite, really, which I guess is maybe ironic in some sense, but I've heard that at least like one half or like around one half of all like scientific literature, meaning like all papers, like papers that with like authors and peer reviews, that it is like flawed or that it's falsified a lot of the time too, or it's like not as accurate as it should be. Like it's not good science. And it's kind of sad to think about, because a lot of times we like to think that if we see a published paper that is peer reviewed, that's cited by multiple people, that it's true, right? And the fact that it isn't, it causes problems in the sense that, there could be doubt casted upon, science in general, science as a whole, and the whole scientific process, which is, obviously not good.
Especially when you're trying to build on a research paper that's flawed and you don't know it's flawed, and then you're doing yourself flawed work.
Before we jump in a little deeper into articles and journals and things like that, I think this, for example, I didn't really know much about research coming into college, and even my freshman year, I didn't know much about it. What is a paper? And how do you get to the point of publishing a paper? I think that's important to establish, because I think that kind of connects back to things being time consuming.
Yeah. So I mean, I can explain, and you guys can add on if you're
go for it. Let's hear
it. So basically, what happens is you have some sort of experiment or you have some sort of project that you work on, and you work on that project, you get your results, and then you analyze the data, and then you write up a paper with introduction, like methods or a procedure on how you did it. You write your results, and then you also write like a discussion, and then you have like an abstract at the top, which is like a summary. But you write all that out, and then you submit it to like a journal or paper, and then they send it to other researchers who are, I'm not sure if they're experts in the field or like
they typically are. I think.
Just people who are in the field or understand, and then they peer review it. So similar to like maybe elementary school when you have like your little essay and then you ask your friend, hey, can you give me corrections on my essay?
Even in high school.
Yeah. And basically they do that to those papers just to make sure, is this data accurate? Like, is this what we'd expect to see? And they make edits and then they resubmit it, and then it goes back to the person who originally wrote it, and they make the edits, and then they submit it, and they keep it's kind of like a process like that. And that process would go on for like
a year and a half, 2 years sometimes.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, super long. Basically.
Yeah, but I think it's really hard to get a publication done less than a year, from what I've heard.
Yeah, unless you have like
something groundbreaking,
or just a lot of people.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, if you're trying to get published,
time-consuming.
Just know it's very time-consuming.
So basically, it's gonna be pretty much impossible for any of us to be published at this point. You think? I think before we get into med school.
Well, it depends. We don't know when we're going to get into med school.
Okay.
The plan is to do a 1 gap year, but what if 5 gap years like Nolan? Yeah. You never know.
Yeah, you never know.
But
still.
One thing I want to touch up on is it's crazy to me that we have this entire peer review process that takes so long, but we still have very flawed papers out there because so many people, so many eyes have been laid on that piece of paper, have gone through it, have read it to make sure that it's good. But then there's still that as you can see, like half of or close to half of these articles are not really that accurate. And that's something I wanted to talk about because a lot of the time, like, I'm like, are you really? Like, that's just insane to me to just think about, like, because there's 1 million publications a year. It's estimated there's 1 million publications a year.
That's
and if
a lot.
there's half of them that are flawed, that's 500,000 publications a year that are just not that useful.
Yeah, and people are
very misleading.
Yeah, people might definitely be wondering, like, how is this happening, or like, why is this happening? But we'll definitely get to that soon. But one thing before I preface like the next thing is, like, if you are not like familiar with this whole process and like with science, this should not deter you from being a believer in science. Like, we all are part of this process, but we still believe. I don't know what happened right there, but we still believe like in science. Like, we still think that science is true. We don't think science is a lie.
Nothing is perfect at the end of the day. I think a lot of this it's more of a quotes unquote rant about something that we like doing and how it could be better.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like, we all still trust science, and we think you should too.
that could be like a radio segment and transition to like theory pre-med.
Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
Yes.
In science we trust.
So there's there's one big problem, or not one big problem, but there's an example of why literature being falsified is bad, and the biggest example, or the one that I could think of, is vaccines and autism. Right? There was a whole paper or a whole study that basically was tying vaccines and autism together and saying that vaccines cause autism.
Yep.
And that was a big problem because, as most people know, like, there was a huge
started
debate.
Believing. Yeah.
And what ended up happening, I think, was that the paper got redacted, which basically means it got like unpublished. And then,
which is a big deal.
Yeah, and then the person also lost the person who published the paper also lost like all of his credentials and stuff like that.
I think he was an MD too, wasn't he?
I think he might. Yeah,
I think he lost his like practicing license as well.
Yeah, just because of how
because it was bad science. It wasn't true.
I mean, think about how like the amount of people that read that, because when you hear vaccines are causing autism, that's the headline.
Yeah,
that's gonna be all over the news. It's not just any type of like.
And it was.
Fine.
And people
for a long time. Yeah.
I mean, imagine how many people today are still thinking that's true.
I know
and
people
aren't getting vaccines because they think it causes autism.
Especially in the whole COVID pandemic.
Totally.
Like, a lot of people, that was one reason why people deterred from getting vaccines.
Yeah, I know.
There's a lot.
I know a family that doesn't have their kids get vaccines because they're afraid of vaccines because of papers like this, stuff that comes out in the media to scare them. So it's kind of a crazy epidemic.
And I'll give you another example too, and this is actually someone I know. One of my professors had a drug in phase 3 clinical trials for degenerative diseases, and the entire research group was basing it off of this one finding within a previous article. And later, while they were in those clinical trials, it actually came out that paper had false data. So all these companies that were basing their thing off of that one specific finding basically put in millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars into all this research just for it to be kind of flawed
Yeah.
and just null. So if you think about it, it's not only a waste of money, but it's also setting that field back 20, 15, 10 years. So it's really impacting the humanity as a whole.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sad.
Really insane.
So now you might be wondering, how does this even happen? And there's a couple reasons like why this might happen, and we can talk about that first, and then we can say like how. But one thing is that a lot of times what happens is publications, like how we talked about. Nathan asked, is it possible for us to get published like before we hopefully get accepted into medical school?
It's like you have undergraduates publishing. That's why.
Yeah. But basically, is because getting a publication is known to be like prestigious. It's like the reason why people, do research is to get those publications, because they're like the cut of that end product really. And sometimes it's like the more you have, the more like favorably you'd be looked upon as like a applicant, maybe for a promotion, for like even med school, or PhDs or PhD programs or anything like that. And so I think what can kind of happen is that people will, do things to their data that will make it look real, so that way they can get some sort of groundbreaking discovery or get some sort of publication, so that way it can help them, put it on their CV, and so that way they can like get a promotion or something like that. Which I think is something
and sometimes it's not even just manipulating the data; it's manipulating the way it's given.
Yeah.
So I was talking to someone who was in the process of writing a paper, and he was like, "Well, look at this graph and all that. Does it look good?" I was like,
can be misleading.
"Well, what is this? What is this telling me? And what should it look like?" And then after like kind of like talking about like to him about it and really like critically thinking about what I was seeing, I found out that the way the graph was oriented changed the shape of the because it's a 3D model type thing. So the way it was turned and oriented changed the shape of it and made it look very flat. But then the second you changed it and the shadow is there, you notice that it's not actually flat how it should be. And that's what I was like, yo, like this is very misleading. Like I think you should kind of reconsider this.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of those things too. It's not just changing data, but it's also the way it's being presented that also matters.
And so there are also like a couple different, I guess I would say techniques, but I mean, they're not like good. But basically what some people I think do is sort of like this idea of like data mining or like data fishing, which I don't really know exactly what the definitions are, but like let's say someone has they have like a graph, or they have a line, like let's say a line of best fit for a bunch of data points. So what might happen is they have a point where if they remove it, then the data would become statistically significant. In other words, that means that like their p-value is less than 0.05, which is saying that there's
biostats.
There's a, what is it, like 5% probability that it's random chance, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
But basically what happens is if they were to remove that point, then the data would be significant, which basically would be, it would be thought of as true. And so then what happens, or what, might happen, is the person would say, well, I think that for this case, this was an anomaly. And I don't think it should, like, they'd reason in their head like that, a reason why it shouldn't be included. And then they take it off and say like, oh, that was like an anomaly or something like that. But that's the problem with that, is that they're doing it after the fact, after they get the data, which is, a little, messy.
And I think it's like, yeah, it sucks to do it, but it's also human nature where you've put in so much work into something and you would hate to see it kind of just not be
turn
true.
Out to anything.
Yeah, exactly. And what
just
you want it to look like.
Time.
And when you see that just simply removing one thing out of it puts everything together, I think it's just so easy to do that instead of going back and doing months of work. Like, for example, when I went to my presentation, I was doing 8 weeks worth of work, testing different things out, different temperatures and all that. And it was all based off of this one experiment. But when I went to make my poster, I realized like, hey, there's actually something going on here. It would have been super easy to change a couple of things and make it look very significant and big. But at the same time, I was like, well, I don't want my name to be on that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. And if there was someone who was a very big professional in the field and came and started asking me questions, I knew eventually it would lead to like bigger questions about whether my data is credible or not. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of it is really just thinking about it twice. And before you do something as big as kind of removing a data piece, be like, hey, am I doing this because I'm being biased towards my data and I want it to work? Or does it actually make sense to remove that piece of data because, let's say, an error happened during the experiment where instead of adding 5 milliliters of this, I added 20.
Yeah. Right. And I think there's just some critical thinking that has to be done.
Totally.
And that's a lot of the reason why these types of works are peer reviewed to test if it's repeatable. Obviously, if you have like an outlier that is always in the reaction or in the product, it could be repeated by somebody else, and then they'll say, oh, this is not credible. So peer review does eliminate a lot of those types of things, but it still can happen.
Now, I want to bring up a good point that you brought up was your article or your piece of paper should be repeatable. Now, when it gets sent out to a peer review, do they actually repeat it?
No.
I think that's the issue.
Really?
Though.
They don't?
Well, think about it. Yeah, they can't.
Why not?
Because imagine it's like a whole like clinical trial vaccine.
Right.
You can't repeat that. That's very difficult because that's years of work.
Yeah. Or if you work with specific cases from like, say you work with tissue samples from someone, if you use those tissue samples, like say you use all of them up and for your data, you can't get those anymore, like no matter what, because you can't get any more of the tissue, right? Ever. So then it's, some things are just like you can't
that makes
really
sense.
do it. I mean, that would only kind of occur, I guess, for like a case study.
There are some things you can repeat, and I'm sure people do repeat, but you're right.
But it would just take a long time.
Yeah, exactly. And it would just be unreasonable to do it because it takes a lot of money too, and so you would need to get money for that.
Yeah.
So I think that if there's a way to figure out how to better check whether an experiment is repeatable, that could obviously lower the number from like a 50-50 to maybe something more reasonable.
You're right.
But I think until then, it's really hard to be like, because it's one thing to read it and say like, okay, this makes sense. And it's another thing to actually be in the motions of actually doing it and then realizing like, hey, this is actually problematic. Like, for example, when you make your procedure, I know this happened to me too. I made a procedure, it looked great. I was like, okay, this is for sure going to work. When I started actually doing it, I was like, oh, wait, these steps don't really work. I need to kind of make a different approach to this. And that's where you go back to the drawing board and really figure things out. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then another thing, I think I've heard of like some people doing is like fidgeting with their question. So a lot of times you'll start out, you'll base your project on a specific question or maybe a specific set of questions, and you'll get the data that way. And then I think sometimes what people might do is once they get their data, they'd be like, well, I mean, we could have also asked that like this different question,
and got
and gotten these whatever results. But the fact of the matter is that this data isn't really applying to that question. It's not really what you were searching for in the beginning. So kind of changing your question to cater around, some sort of answer, I think is always not the most accurate.
It's okay to discover something you weren't trying to discover, obviously.
I think it's different. There's a distinction.
You have to be honest about it.
I think where the big difference comes is where you're completely changing the question to something new or where you're branching out into something. So I think it's okay to start off with one question and finding results for it and then being curious whether these results will apply or affect something else. And that's where you do the results for one thing and then you take those results and build off of those results to go and answer another question. And that's how science is. You get a lot of results, you find things that are interesting, and you're like, hey, I'm actually more interested in this now. Let me take it that way. And that's how research is. You find new things out every day and you build on it.
Yeah, and just to like also say like we're not professionals, we
PhDs.
We're not professionals in the field, so there's a lot of things that we don't know.
This is just a student's perspective.
Yeah, that's just our perceptions as of right now.
What's today? Today is November 4th, 2022.
Dang.
So as of November 4th.
And check us back in 200 years, we'll all be experts as well, as well as having our millionth episode, and science is proven.
Yeah,
all that.
So another thing that I think we totally found surprising was differences in lab cultures. I think that one piece of advice that is definitely great for anyone who's doing research is, try your best to not feel discouraged or feel stuck just because of, like the people, I guess, who are in your lab, right? I think personally that the people in your lab are the people that make it. And, I think it doesn't really matter what topic you're studying. If you're studying it with people who are fun or who are like you, then I think that makes it all worth the while.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I mean, I love our lab group, of course. I think even though we're all working separately, it's cool to come together and share our stuff.
Most weeks.
Most weeks. Sometimes we don't meet. But Todd, how do you feel about your lab partners? We never really hear about them.
I mean, I have
Todd hates
my
his
lab.
partners. Yeah, I know.
No.
He's like, yeah, that guy, like, I hate him. I don't know why he's still on the project.
No. I love all the people in my lab. I think that they're all really, really nice, and a lot of them are very down to earth. And I feel like they've taught me so much, not just in terms of science and research, but also about these things that we're talking about today in terms of doing good science, being honest, being ethical, and doing things like the right way, not just so that way you can get funding or that you can get a promotion, but to do things, honestly. And I feel like I've been able to have a very good time. I've been able to meet a lot of really nice people, and get really good mentorship in my lab and my experience this past like 2.5 years, I guess.
You've been 2.5 years. Wow.
Yeah, and it's been a really good experience for me. I think it's on my med school app. It's definitely going to be like one of the top 3 most meaningful for me.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, but I think I've been presented with a lot of great opportunities, a lot of education, and things that and people I've met who will definitely influence me for the rest of my life.
All right. Well, that's really great to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, keep doing it as long as you can.
I feel with our lab, Nathan, like, yeah, we do meet and stuff, but I think there's definitely a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're relatively new.
I mean, yeah,
like, lab too,
just started.
So we're still growing and things like that. But I think it will be having those older people in there who can help you kind of realize all the different things in research that they've kind of gained over their years in research is really important, because if you start at a younger age, kind of like being cognizant of these things, it could help you, especially with your biases and things like that, which is really important. But I think there's 2 different types of cultures within labs. It's either you have different subgroups of a research and they're all very competitive and there's no interaction, and I think that's not a really safe space to be in.
Are you serious?
What? I think
you've heard that?
Yeah.
Dang, that's crazy. No, to me it's just crazy.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of things like that.
And a lot of the time that's when like each group is just working on their own thing and they're just want to get their thing done and that's it. But then in other groups where everyone just builds on themselves, and I think that's where you create a really good lab and a very collaborative lab, and that's where you're able to really progress things forward.
Yes.
I think a lot of the reasons where the other type of culture comes into play is where funding is a big issue, where you need a lot of funding for that specific project, and you're going to do whatever you can to receive that funding. Because when you start collaborating with other groups, then you're going to be sharing that funding a lot more, and that could be you might see that as problematic.
Yep, money is the root of all evil.
Cash is king. Cash is king.
And all research.
So I think as we get closer to the end of the episode, what are some important key points I think the viewer you can take away from this?
Well, one thing, and we did just briefly mention it, but the thing is, I think people should not really like feel stuck. I think if you aren't having maybe the best experience in research, don't think that this is the only type of research, because research in itself is so diverse.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's people like us who work at a lab bench who are doing reactions, they're doing chemistry or like that sort of stuff. But then there's also people like field ecologists who will literally go to like islands or tropical places and study the ecology around there, or they'll go to like these research centers that are like these islands literally just for research, which I think is super cool. And like they do sea diving every single day. Basically it's diverse. The people in it are diverse. The things you can study are diverse, and the work that you can do is diverse. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I think in the same sense, don't get stuck in like the same lab if you want to explore other areas. As a pre-med, it can be very beneficial to join other research groups and not stay in the same place for so long. Although it is nice to like, really dedicate your time like Todd is doing, and he really enjoys his research. But I think like Mo has switched labs a couple times.
One time.
One time. But that's good because, you were doing food science and you had that experience and you wanted something new. So really good. I think that's something to take away.
I think another thing that you could take away is just make sure that you're happy. And there's going to be times where you're not going to be happy, and that's okay, because that's part of the learning process where you get stuck. And sometimes it could be very frustrating, especially when you're learning a new type of, how to use a new type of equipment. For example, like for us, it was atomic force microscopy, which is something only PhD students typically use.
I still have to learn that.
Yeah, and it's so difficult to use it, and because there's so many different options, and but your thing is specific to certain options. So I think the biggest thing is just be curious, try to learn as much as you can, and take away as much as you can from the lab, and really ask questions. And I think at the end of the day, if you're able to leave the lab and say, I learned something, whether why something doesn't work or why something is working, or you're able to leave with a very good question from the lab, you've done something that day.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we're all undergraduates. We're all still learning. We're all still at the beginning of our careers. So there's still a lot of time, and just give it a chance.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Like, you learn the best, I think, when you make mistakes. For me, this one time, and I can actually talk about it now, like in detail, because now we know from biochem. But you guys know how for a Western blot, you have to like block and then you put your antibody solutions on.
Yeah.
Because we did it. We did it in lab.
You do that in your research lab.
Yeah, and I don't do Western blots, but I do something similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was one time I put the primary antibody on before I put the block on. And I was like, oh, shoot, because that costs a lot of money, and now we know too. And then also it was just, yeah, it was big kind of mess. But yeah.
Wait, I thought you put the block after the primary antibody to block for the fluorescent antibody. No, it's the other way around? Okay. Well, we haven't done it yet, so.
Yeah.
We did, didn't we?
We did. We did Western.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. We did it once.
Yeah, but I think the biggest thing is just be honest with yourself and then learn from it. It's okay to make mistakes. One thing I've been doing a lot, I don't know why it's been happening, is, or actually only happened once. I broke one of the flasks in our lab, and I was so
heating
frustrated.
It?
Huh?
Heating it?
No, I was just washing it, and it just cracked, and it popped.
Really?
And I looked at it, and I was like,
wait, that happened so much in OChem lab last
yeah. But I think, yeah. So a good end to the episode before we do the most pre-med thing to say is, if you were doing a hot reaction, don't just put it in cold water right away, or it will pop. It's happened to me.
With any glass.
Yeah, with any glass. So that's the
takeaway. I'm remembering one particular event in OChem lab where a hot thing was transferred to somebody's fingers. That was not fun.
Won't name names.
We won't talk about it that much, but yeah.
Anyways, I think the most pre-med thing to say here is I want to get published. I think that's okay. A fair one.
Yeah.
For today's topic. But Nathan, take us out.
All right. Thank you guys, as always, so much for watching and listening. Be sure to check out our recent TikToks and that viral one we talked about.
Somewhat viral.
Somewhat viral.
It's viral. It's all relative.
Yeah, we're famous, guys. We're famous.
Remember, we have episodes every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Go follow our social medias. At Theory Premed on Instagram, Snapchat. No, not Snapchat.
We should
Spotify, maybe Snapchat in the future. But thanks again so much for watching, and we will see ya.
Bye.
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 We just stopped talking for some reason there.
No, I wanted to make it awkward and be like,
bye.
Just look at you basically.